Hello, everyone. I'm Robin Gavor and the host for a panel discussion about Jen Johnson's video on teacher self-compassion and self-care. Thank you for being here, panelists. I will ask you, I'll call on you to introduce yourselves. Deborah.
I'm Deborah Georgie. I teach first grade at Valley Springs Elementary.
And do we have Josh Swanson?
You do, I'm here, getting my webcam worked out. My name is Josh Swanson. I teach English at Bret Harte High School.
Thank you, Josh. Katie Hood.
There we go. Hi, I'm Katie Hood. I am a teaching principal at West Point Elementary in Calaveras County.
Hi, Katie. And Jessica Hanges.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hanges. I'm a second, third grade teacher at Copperopolis Elementary.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you. Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Housewander. I am Director of Ed Services for Calaveras Unified School District.
And Eugene. Hello.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eugene Allende. I am the school counselor at Calaveras High, and I'm also in private practice as a therapist in the community. Good to be here.
Thank you. Welcome, panelists. Okay, panelists, you'll each have 5 minutes to respond to my inquiry, and I will let you know when there's 1 minute left. So the inquiry is, what resonated with you in the Jen Johnson video? How do you practice self-care? What do you struggle with regarding self-care? And I'll start with Deborah, please. You have 5 minutes.
Well, I want to start out by describing that Friday night at the end of the first week of hybrid teaching. That was fun. It was really fun, right? I was very bleak. I felt piled upon, and I did 3 things that Jen Johnson talked about in her video to help me get through that. The 3 things I did were pause, and I took some time to reflect, and I reached out to my teaching community, but it didn't unfold all that pretty. So what happened is I get in the car and I'm feeling really stuck, and I have this half an hour drive from Valley Springs to Angels Camp. And during that drive, I am just in this, what she calls that narrative of everything is horrible and it's always going to be like that, and boy, I'm going to write this email to my administrators and I'm going to let them know how horrible things are, and I'm going to complain to my coworkers, and I'm going to let my husband have it too because he needs to have a piece of this, and that's where I was. And I got home, and what ended up happening was I got really quiet, and I wasn't well yet. It wasn't a happy quiet, but instead of lashing out, I actually just listened to my husband talk about his day, and I was still miserable, but I fed myself. I had a can of turkey chili, so don't judge me. Sometimes that's what you have to do to get through the night, right? And I went to bed at like 8:30. So that's the pause. That's just doing really basic feed and rest stuff. And then the next morning, I woke up, and instead of hitting the ground running and doing all my Saturday morning things, I took my cup of coffee and I sat in my comfortable chair and I reflected, and I did what she asked us to do, which is name my feelings. And the feelings that I had were so familiar to me. I've been here before. I've been overwhelmed before. I have had resentment before, and I've had fear before. And the fear was like, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to pull this off. But just doing those things allowed me to come back to center. And so I didn't cause more damage by lashing out and acting on my urgent sense of immediacy to let everybody know how horrible it was. I didn't have to clean that up. I felt rested, and I had an idea. So the problem was still there, but I was different. I felt just more centered. So then the community part comes, and I reach out to my partner. Even though it's Saturday, I have a great partner. She doesn't mind. And I productively described the problem to her. And that means I didn't go on and on and on and on about the problem and blame other people. I just told her, I can't do all of this. This is what I can't do. And I had a solution, and I was open to her solution. And together we came up with some ways to make the next couple of weeks sustainable. And it's been a little better. But I really want to talk about this community, because self-care, it's huge for me to have people on my campus and in my district that I am in the habit of reaching out to and talking. So in talking to about my problems. So instead of me just going into that place of feeling broken and panic, which is where I was, and thinking that I'm abnormal, I talked to my partner and I realized that I'm not alone in my struggle, and that my struggle, in fact, is actually typical. And together we worked it out, and we even had a couple of laughs over it.
1 minute.
So, so for me, it really works out to have people on campus and in my district, a community that I can work with. Right now it's really tempting to close my door and be by myself. And I only have time to get this much done. So I have to just dig in by myself. But really, the times that I'm reaching out to my fellow teachers are the most uplifting parts of my day, besides working with the kids that I finally get to work with. So am I capable of bashing people and places and things? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I feel more serene and confident when I have found out what my part is and talked about that with another teacher. So I'm glad you're all here taking care of yourself. Thanks.
Thank you, Deborah. I forgot to mention that we won't be having time for Q&A today with the number of panelists we have. And so now, please, I'll call on Josh Swanson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's exciting with how many people are in this. But yeah, I think I would have been, first off, I would have been one to maybe be hesitant to be full on accepting of this type of topic and content. Maybe even 3 or 4 years ago, I would have had some doubts about just generally like not really buying into it, I guess, would be my argument. But I've definitely realized over the last little bit that name it to tame it type of attitude is important. As a kid, and even until recently, I would say that I was under the impression that if you named it, that it exists and that you then have to deal with it. So it's better to just not name it and let it kind of go away. But obviously that stuff doesn't go away. So I think one things I could say mainly is just that, I myself am beginning to understand how this content and a lot of the stuff that Jen Johnson said in her video, how it's helpful to me, not just in my profession, which is obviously important, but just generally kind of being more accepting of myself and my capabilities and things that I'm doing. Generally, I wouldn't say that I would be one to display a lot of self-compassion. I think I'm pretty critical on myself. I think I always have been. But I don't think, that's kind of a double-edged sword. I'm critical of myself, and that can be self-defeating at times and can be damaging at times, but it is also the thing that keeps me to a certain standard. And so I think it's hard to find the balance of like what our expectations are of ourselves and then dealing with the gap between what our expectations are of ourselves and where we ultimately land. I think especially right now, our expectations are like all over the place because we don't really know what can a student do if they're at home all week on a computer? Like what can they do realistically? And so even our expectations of our students tend to be all over the place. And so the discrepancies between our expectations of ourselves or others and what we actually do, I think, at least for me, is where I tend to find myself going to a place that's not exactly helpful. And so I think she talked about avoiding extremes, right? Like avoiding it altogether, but also avoiding kind of being swept away. I think the fact that when she talked about emotions really only meant to being last 90 seconds was really helpful. Just in terms of, having those emotions, being really frustrated on a Friday, like you said, or whatever it may be, and then just kind of sitting with that and letting that kind of run its course. Like I said, I think our expectations are what make us good as teachers. Like the teachers that I see around my campus that I think are really good are the ones that have really, really high expectations, not only for themselves, but for their students. And so it's not a matter of getting rid of those, just maybe reevaluating those on a more consistent basis. She talked about the way that we talk to ourselves, you know, and we live with ourselves 24/7. So it's easy to be critical of ourselves, but I think it is important to kind of take a step back and kind of really recognize the way that you're speaking to yourself, whether you're speaking to yourself as somebody who loves that person and respects that person, thinks that person has value, or whether you talk to them some other way, right? Or talk to yourself some other way. I had a coworker a few years ago tell me, you know, like your thoughts and your ideas of who you are and the world around you all stem from your brain, but your brain is not always like being totally truthful and getting the full picture. And so he said, you know, a lot of times you need to rely on those people around you, whether they're teachers or your loved ones or administrators or students that say like, hey, you're a really good teacher, you know, and not like dismissing that and not saying like, oh yeah. But really like accepting that and really kind of like taking ownership over that. I think it's easy for us to say, yeah, that's nice and all, but I really know that I'm, you know, not great, or I'm not as what you think. So understanding what other people are telling you to, or what they're telling you, taking that as truth and not taking that as people being nice or people being fake or whatever it is, that most people, especially the ones close to you, are being honest about who you are and what your value is. And then I think the other thing that she mentioned was our desire to alleviate suffering. And I think as teachers, we can find ourselves taking pride in like suffering and take pride in the fact that our lives.
That's 1 minute, Josh.
Okay, thank you. I think as teachers, we take pride in kind of not in suffering, but in demonstrating that we're committed to being really good at our jobs. And sometimes that turns into spending all of Sunday grading and lesson planning, or all weekend doing that. And I think that turns into boundaries being broken down in your attempt to try to fill in the gaps between what you expect of yourself as a teacher and maybe your shortcomings in of that. You know, when I leave work on Friday, if I feel good about my week, if I feel like my students were engaged and they got what they needed to get done, I am honestly less inclined to answer emails all week because I feel like I'm good. Like I did my job, I did what I needed to do. But when I leave feeling crushed, feeling like a failure, feeling, you know, how we feel on some Fridays, you can bet that I will answer my emails more, just as a way to somehow make myself kind of feel better about myself, I guess. So it's generally new to me. I still am appreciating all of it, and I'm trying to kind of work it into a way that allows me to be a more productive reflector of my own self as opposed to a destructive reflector.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
Katie Hood is next. So Katie also has a video. Katie, you just let us know when you'd like that to play. So Katie will we'll see the video from her school, as well as she'll have her 5 minutes. Go ahead, Katie, welcome.
Sure, thank you. So I won't take too much time. I'd like to show the video, but just a little background. I'm Katie Hood. I'm the principal at West Point Elementary School. And back in 2015, our whole staff went to a presentation at Calaveras County Office of Education by Sally Arnold, and she was working with Calaveras First Five and Joyce Peak. And it was about mindfulness and how it could benefit educators and students and schools. And we said, hey, sure, we'll go check it out. And by the end of the presentation, we all just decided, you know, this is what we need for our school. This is what our students need, and this is what our teachers need. Our school has about currently 81 and a half students who report as socioeconomically disadvantaged. So, and we know we have a high number of students who have experienced trauma, you know, just like everyone does. But we just felt like this could be a good fit for helping our students be able to focus at school and to build a positive climate and culture at our school. So we're in our 5th year of full implementation of that program. And I guess, I don't know, I kind of call it a program, but because we all, well, first of all, backing up a little bit, our staff committed to a 6-week training in the personal practice of mindfulness. And so we all made that commitment to do that on our own time. We did it over the summer. And then all 100% strongly felt that we wanted to jump in right away with our students and begin teaching them mindfulness. So that very next school year on day one, we started in 2016, piloting in partnership with First Five again and Mindful Schools, which is based in Emeryville. And we began teaching, well, first of all, the teachers had this now foundation in the personal practice of mindfulness, which was huge because, you know, having that buy-in from teachers and that foundation made it be something that the students could see us doing at the same time. And so then the students started learning about their brain, and we started with, you know, brain science, and they loved that. And kindergartners even learning about their prefrontal cortex and their amygdala and all these words that they loved learning, and how they could use their breath and just taking a moment to slow down, stop, breathe. Even just 3 breaths we learned is going to help sort of reset us. So over time, it's been, I think this is our 5th year now. The reason why I say sometimes I hesitate to call it a program, it's not really a program. It's not like a curriculum that we teach. It's just sort of a way of being. Most teachers start their day with a class meeting. They do some mindfulness. They maybe have some affirmations. They talk about how they can be kind that day, showing empathy, maybe sharing some gratitude. We also start and end our assemblies with a mindfulness practice. Teachers use transitions to practice. Even just a short, like 3 minutes of time, we found saves a whole lot more time. You know, as we front load with 3 minutes of mindfulness, it really gets kids settled in and focused on their jobs. And so then it just got woven through pretty much everything we do. We start staff meetings that way. And it has really changed the culture of our school. We actually had some data that showed that the first year—
1 minute, Katie.
Oh, wow, that was fast. The first year we went, we took our suspension rate in half. And it has actually bumped up just a little bit, but it's still half of what it used to be. And so we've just seen some real positive impacts, we think. And so I want to share this video with you. It is kind of the way that we kind of try to keep expanding what we're doing with mindfulness. How can we reach out more to parents, to students, to the community about what this is about? So I don't know how to share the video. Someone else is going to do that.
The way I use mindfulness to help me calm down and focus is I sit down, close my eyes, and I really just do it. It just calms me down.
So when we began teaching mindfulness in the classroom, which really focused a lot at first on teaching the kids about their brains, teaching them about how the different parts of their brain helps them to make decisions in different ways. Over time, they can learn to sort of use mindfulness to help parts of their brain be able to settle into school and to focus.
Mindfulness helps me in school with my schoolwork because let's say I'm stuck on a problem and I'm getting really angry about it. I can just use mindfulness, look at it from a different angle and finish it.
I think about we all need to breathe. Breathing is the foundation of mindfulness. It is physically the body just taking a breath and slowing down and stopping.
I practice mindfulness at home when I'm really mad at my sister, like when she gets like on my nerves. I would go in the woods and do mindfulness and try to calm down. And I'd take 3 deep breaths, and then I'd come back to my house and like try to restart.
Well, to me, mindfulness is when you take very deep breaths to relax yourself. It helps you focus.
Mindfulness gives kids an opportunity for a reset. It's like this ability to just kind of sit back and remove themselves from whatever situation is giving them problems, whether it's another student or something at home or being anxious, and just being able to take some breaths and find yourself in the moment and move forward in a way that's more productive.
If someone says something rude to you, you just take a mindful breath. It's calm, quiet, and you breathe and tell them, please don't do that again. When I use mindfulness is when I'm stressed. My mind just fills up with that. But when I start breathing with my eyes closed, it really helps when your eyes are closed, though, because you can image something happy.
I've been practicing mindfulness for 3 years. It is such a huge piece with self-care. I would say is the best buy-in a teacher could have, is because teachers need self-care, and you get that from mindfulness.
In the classroom, one of our mega skills is perseverance, and they've learned that if something gets difficult, they don't throw up their hand, they don't give up. They've learned that by taking their mindful breaths and looking at it a different way, they are finding their confidence, and they're finding that breathing and just taking time to work through it themselves is helping them become more successful in the classroom as well.
One of the really cool things I think that has come of it is during our Friday morning dance. When we're done, we come together, the whole entire school, and we do 1 to 2 minutes of absolute silent mindfulness. Teachers, staff, students from kindergarten all the way to 6th grade practicing their breathing and getting themselves ready to go to class.
When I'm upset, my body feels really crazy, and I cannot control it like when I'm doing mindfulness. I usually just sit there really calmly and suck in air through my mouth or my nose and then breathe it out through my mouth. And then when I'm done, I take my fingers and I wiggle them, and it helps me focus a lot.
Mindfulness is a way for me to calm down, like if I'm stressed or something, like to get things off of my mind.
When I'm angry and sad, it feels like I'm super tight, and all my energy goes out. I feel calm.
It's about a feeling that your entire student body has, that they're loved and that they're respected and that we hear them, because none of those other things, math, science, language arts, none of it will happen until they feel safe and secure.
Beautiful video. Our next panelist to speak is Jessica.
So I just want to start by saying I love Jen Johnson. She really speaks to my heart. I wish Jen Johnson had a podcast I could listen to every day. After watching her video, I think what resonated with me the most was about how to deal with emotions. And I think right now, a lot of our emotions are really heightened because of the current situation we're in, and we're dealing with situations that we normally wouldn't, which brings on emotions that we normally wouldn't deal with. And for me, this is personal because I don't like to deal with negative emotions. I only like happy emotions. I run from negative emotions, and I try to stay in a very happy little bubble. And so I think that it was a nice thing to hear how to deal with negative emotions rather than to run from them. So I was going to kind of talk about what her technique was, because I think it was a great technique that we could all use and learn from. And what it was called, or it's not her technique, but it was, she spoke about the technique called expansion. And expansion has 4 different steps. And she said the steps are to observe, to breathe, to create space, and to allow. And so I thought what I would do is give an example of a time that like a time in my classroom last week, and when I should have used these steps, but I didn't. So the example is I was teaching math, and when I'm done with the lesson, I look down and little Sally is very frustrated. And it's apparent that Sally did not do well in the math lesson. She probably didn't understand it to my expectations or to her own expectations, but the school day is over. So we leave, and I come back to my classroom, and I, instead of doing what Jen Johnson says, I put a story to it, which Jen Johnson says, do not put a story to it, which I always try to put a story to it. So I feel these negative feelings, and right away I start thinking about how I could have done my lesson better, or what I should have done different. And then it really goes into, well, why couldn't I have done my lesson better? Because I'm restricted on time because of the current situation that's going on right now, which makes it this big and bigger and bigger, and this huge story by the end that I'm very angry with COVID. You know, it's like little Sally didn't learn because of COVID. So anyways, I'm wrestling with this story, and I'm going round and round. And so what Jen Johnson says to do is, what I should have done is right away, I should have taken a breath. And the first step is I should have observed it, which is like the name it to tame it. It's identifying the emotion. So I should have sat there and tried to take some breath while I was observing this emotion. And my emotion probably would have been frustration and disappointment and guilt. And so you observe and you're identifying. And while you're doing that, you then now go into breathing. And while you're breathing, you create space within your being to allow the emotion to come. And I mean, obviously this is something that doesn't come natural to us. I think we naturally want to make it go away or to solve it. But she said that if we can do these things, if we can observe it and identify it, breathe, create space and allow it, which she said you can use an image also to try to, she said she'll use a blue blob for sadness that will help her focus on that, so she can really try to take that emotion in. That, as Josh said, the emotion will leave after 90 seconds. So rather than going round and round for minutes or hours or even days with a particular emotion, if you just let it come within you and recognize it and breathe it out, it'll leave in 90 seconds. So I think that was something that I definitely am going to work on, and that I feel like would be helpful.
1 minute, Jessica.
Thank you. For all of us. And I feel like then, you know, I can go back to my happy little bubble as long as I let the emotion sink in for 90 seconds. So that was what I felt like I took away from the most from Jen Johnson, who I love. And that's all.
Thank you, Jessica. And up next we have Amy Hasselwander.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being part of this, and just want to ditto what everyone has already said. And I think what I took away from Jen Johnson mostly is her talk about self-compassion, and how we need to allow educators to come out of a crisis less scarred. How do we do that as people? Whatever that crisis is. Obviously now we're in a pandemic, and we can name that as definitely a crisis. So from a district perspective, how do we support our principals who support teachers and other staff members who support students? I'd like to start with a couple of premises. We know that educators at all levels are so often overtasked and under-resourced that they don't take time to prioritize self-care. We know that prioritizing self-care is incredibly important and beneficial for both educators and their students. especially when it comes to supporting students affected by trauma. And we know that teaching is an emotional labor. We must provide ways for educators to cope with, care for themselves in order to prevent burnout. You know, I reflected this weekend about why I became an educator. And I just think that's so often such a good thing for educators to do, no matter what your position is within a school district. Why did we become an educator? We have to be on our game when dealing with trauma. We can't just expect teachers to know, or others to know, how to take care of themselves. But it's so important that we deal with student social emotional needs. Clearly, COVID's added a whole new layer to this. About 6 months prior to COVID, I was fortunate to go to a meeting up in Sacramento with Mark Brackett, who's the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And he talks about a mood meter that is a very simple way of measuring where you are emotionally at any time. You can find that if you look up Mark Brackett or you look up mood meter. There's actually an app that I have on my phone that I find myself using quite often, just trying to, right, name the feeling, name where I'm at, and then kind of think about what I can do for self-care. It was interesting. There were a lot of high-level people, I don't know, and at this meeting, and leaders could not name ways of self-care. They just had such a hard time doing that. And that really resonated with me in terms of, how do we start with ourselves? We put our oxygen masks on first before we help others. And if we don't allow educators, teachers to do that and give them the space to do that, we're not going to do good by kids. So Jen Johnson also talks about signs of compassion fatigue, and we're seeing it. I'm sure everybody listening to this in education has seen that compassion fatigue, even personally, or in the others that we work with. And I just think it's really important that we help each other out, know what's going on, you know, kind of look for those struggles that our peers and our colleagues are having, and then providing ways to support them, such as, you know, just continuous professional development around self-care and mindfulness, which is obviously incredibly important. Just love seeing kids from that video talk about what mindfulness does for them. And providing teachers with a space to talk about trauma and healthy coping skills. One of our counselors, who happens to be on this panel, just kind of naturally began that at the high school where he works, in working with teachers on what, you know, just letting them talk about what they need, and then providing those ideas of healthy routines. If we don't have healthy routines, right, the work that we do with kids will be less effective. So it's common for educators, and we've heard here today, to have a sense of failure, not being able to fix the woes of their students sometimes. Jessica spoke to that, Deborah spoke to that, Josh spoke to that. And if we can help our teachers and others, everybody working with students, to just know at the end of the day, right? Or, well, let's start at the beginning of the day. We show up each day to support each other and students, advocate for them, love them. Just the statement of, I will provide a loving and safe environment in my classroom today. But at the end of the day, you know, that breathing in and out, and knowing and recognizing and even saying to yourself, I have done good work today, but I'm going to let that stress and worry go till tomorrow, right? To have that balance when the day is done. Finally, just want to talk about the need to build a strong peer network. We can't go this alone. we have to work in our schools to cultivate a school culture where we're supporting each other is the norm. Build small support groups. Have a colleague that you partner with, that you check in with, that you can take a walk with during a prep period or during the time of the day that you can take a break. Just begin meetings with breathing exercises or using that mood meter to identify our feelings and allowing everybody to self-regulate. Just that peer support makes a strong foundation for our hard work.
1 minute, Amy.
So again, just to close, we want all of us, we want all educators and teachers to come out of this crisis less scarred. And we just have to have those constant self-care moments.
Thank you, Amy. And up next, please, is Eugene Allende.
Thank you, Robin. Such an honor to be here in the presence of such esteemed colleagues and such caring, compassionate people. It's really inspiring to see that this is the front line that is meeting our children on a day-to-day basis. So 2 things I wanted to just highlight in everything that's everyone said. The 2 pieces that I find most powerful in self-regulating oneself are presence and breath. Just to go back a little bit, I'm really happy that there is this symposium happening around trauma. We all know that trauma underlines any behavioral issue, any learning issue, any dysregulation that happens in the classroom or in society, right? Trauma is at the base, and we're just beginning to understand how trauma works. And given what we've gone through in the 2020, I don't think there's anybody here that has not had a little bit of trauma imprinted in their nervous system, right? So as a lot of the earlier trainings talked about, trauma gets locked into the body, many times unconscious to the rational mind. So if a child is acting out, they're not aware of the fact that they are dysregulated because of some past trauma, right? So how can we as people help them, as educators, as counselors, as staff, help our children regulate themselves? We can't fix their problems. We can't take away their trauma. But what we can do is start with ourselves, because we are the environment in which these kids are growing and learning and expanding. If we are dysregulated, if we come home or come to school or to the Zoom meeting in a state of stress, of anxiety, of depression, they're tuning into that. Their nervous system has already got you tagged. Even though they don't know it, they're feeling dysregulated because we are dysregulated. So the first step is to learn how to regulate ourselves. Okay, so this is where breath comes in and mindfulness. Wow, to have it in the schools, I think is such a powerful tool, because we're not just teaching them concepts, we're teaching them about themselves, how to be with themselves, how to be with their emotions, and how to navigate through all that through the use of breath. Real quick, why is breath so powerful? We all know that breath is regulated by the brainstem, that autonomic reptilian brain, right? That is in charge of the fight, flight, freeze response. And breathing is normally very unconscious. It's just happening. And in fact, it could be an indicator of how we are feeling. How are you breathing right now? Are you fast and shallow? You're probably a little anxious. Are you holding it in? You may be uptight or stressed or frustrated, right? But if you're slow, deep, and rhythmic, most likely you're in a relaxed state. But see, normally that's an unconscious process. So if we flip it around and take a deep conscious breath, let's just all do that right now as you're sitting there. Deep conscious breath. Immediately, you've flipped it from the autonomic nervous system to from the involuntary to the voluntary, right? No longer is it managed by the reptilian brainstem. Now you've switched it to a higher circuit of the prefrontal cortex. A conscious breath immediately brings the frontal cortex online. And guess what? That's the piece of our brain that allows more awareness, rational thought, etc. So a couple of conscious breaths will always switch the system. The network will be switched, right? Number one. And number two, what is it that kids really want from us ultimately as caring adults? See, if you're a parent, what do your kids want? They want your attention. They want your presence, right? They don't want your guidance. They don't want your instruction. They don't want your opinion. They want your attention. Well, we as educators or counselors or staff members in the school system, we act as sort of surrogate parents in a way. And what do the kids want? Our presence, our attention, our love in the deeper sense, right? And if they're traumatized, they can't feel that. They can't feel it unless you are regulated. So presence is a very powerful thing that we can offer kids. If we don't know how to fix their the trauma or their depression or their anxiety, it doesn't matter. If we're present, if we're listening, if we're watching them, if we're seeing them, that's creating a deep healing response within them, because they're meeting an adult that doesn't want to hurt them. They're meeting an adult that cares, that is there for them, right? But how do we do that? We do what everybody on this panel has been talking about, self-care. Like Amy said, putting on your mask first. Great strategies everybody mentioned, but
1 minute.
at the end of the day, okay, thank you. At the end of the day, before you go into your classroom, before you get into your car and drive, take a couple of deep breaths. Immediately, your body will shift into a more present state, right? And then with the exhale, train your exhale to release whatever is that you no longer need. Any stress from the past, anything that you're worried about, just let it go as you breathe out. That'll give you the opportunity to be present and offer that presence to your students, your coworkers, and the world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So panelists, we have 15 minutes left. So what's going to happen now is a discussion. I imagine there being 6 of you that there are some thoughts that have come up. So I'm not going to do a timing, but I am going to ask that people raise their hand would like to go. You don't have to keep it up. I'll jot it down and call on people in order. Is there someone who would like to jump in right now?
Sure. I love what you said about just having that self-regulation before you even come to work, you know, and just making yourself available for kids. And so I'm going to dig out some greeting cards today and make sure my teachers remember that, and just remind them that to leave school knowing that they've done a great job, and that they can take some time for themselves this evening. So thank you, Eugene, for the reminder.
Deborah, thank you.
So I really liked what Amy had to share about the, what is it, when the affirmations, and I'm, heard of those before, but those affirmations of, yes, this is what I want my classroom to be like, to have that visualization of what the tenor and the mood that I want to set, and to cause that to happen by myself being centered with that breathing technique, those breathing techniques that you've talked about. And to be able to use that affirmation at the end of the day, to let the day go, and to go and be with my husband, and not to bring my day home to my husband, so that the next day I could come back renewed and refreshed and gear back up. I mean, honestly, today I felt the way, who was it? I guess Jessica. Jessica was describing, I wish I was better. I wish I were a better teacher today. And so I know that I can leave that. I can do some reflection in the morning. I could do some breathing before I open the door to the kids, and I can start over tomorrow. I don't have to beat myself up. And I love that idea about, we really have to reach out to each other, and if we're going to be in this for a while, and I know some of you out there have been in this for a while, I've known my teacher friends for decades now. And so it's in my best interest to have good relationships with my cohorts. And that doesn't just happen automatically. I get to reach out and invite them in to conversations with me.
Thank you, Deborah. Anyone else have a raise of the hand? Eugene?
Yeah, I love what everybody's saying. I also just wanted to underscore the sort of this trauma-informed approach to teaching and to counseling and to being with each other. And just as a question that we may want to ask ourselves, what are we reacting to when say the child is acting out, right? Are we reacting to the behavior and to the, the dysregulation, or are we informed that there is a trauma below that? And what that I feel would do is allow us to be more aware and more compassionate. So the trauma-informed piece I think is important. And then for us too, I mean, why are we getting so uptight? What emotion needs caring? What emotion needs that attention in us? So yeah, so just really kind of keeping that trauma-informed approach, I think will help us not just react, but really respond, right? As I think some other presenters talked about.
Thank you, Jean. Any other? Amy.
I think that stepping back before we react to a student who might be misbehaving has to be learned, right? We have to learn that and practice that. And again, not beat up on ourselves when that happens. I watched a student who was really struggling at school the other day and was found down on the track, thankfully by an employee, but he had left a second Chromebook at home. They weren't charged. He forgot his mask. Who knows what else was going on in this student's day. So a staff member, talked to him, brought him back to class. And as that student entered class, a teacher who is one of the most nurturing, one of the most understanding, one of the most recognizes that students have stories that they're not really aware of. Just kind of shout out, where have you been? And gosh, I was afraid for you, didn't know where you were. Oh my God, you left 2 Chromebooks at home. How are you going to learn today? So it was a reaction that really felt like fear or maybe that, oh my God, you're okay, you're safe. And so we just have to take that moment, that time to breathe in and not react to people who are undergoing stress and trauma, and just to be aware that that might be going on. I don't think any student deliberately misbehaves. There's always an underlying reason for it. So just to be aware, and this COVID has made it so important for that self-care, but also so difficult for our teachers and staff that work with kids, because they are dealing with their own emotions. And again, can't stress the importance of knowing self-care skills, naming them and practicing them, instead of somebody like me who might just think, okay, well, everybody already knows how to take care of themselves. Not true. We have to support each other so that we can support our kids.
Thank you, Amy. So folks, something I'm hearing a thread of, and I'd like to have some more discussion, some more panelist responses to is the self-compassion, the triad of mindfulness and self-kindness and connectedness. And I think about self-empathy, that beating ourselves up, that not doing it well enough. Jen Johnson and so many and ourselves assert that we need self-compassion in order to really dive into self-care. So again, self-compassion, self-empathy, the winding that in with connectedness with others, with self-kindness and with mindfulness, kind of a broad inquiry. So who would like to respond first? Deborah, thank you.
So I definitely, with regard to what do I struggle with the most, it is that, I hate to say it in front of all these people, but a sense of inherent worth. And so I have a lot of practices that I've developed over the years, and they serve me well, But I think they would serve me even better and perhaps even more quickly or more efficiently if I had that deep down inherent sense of worth. And I worked on that over the years. I've gotten outside help, but it's definitely something that I see that I continue to need work on, and to know that if I need work on that, other people probably need that too. You know, I had a situation the other day when I was frustrated with somebody else, and I was reminded that rather than to look at all of the things that were different between us and being frustrated with that person, to look at all of the things that were similar between the two of us, which is a lot. You know, we share the same profession, we live in the same county, we both care about kids, we both work hard. And immediately I felt relief. But to know also that a lot of us share in common this struggle with feeling, I don't know, confident in ourselves. So yeah, I hope other people realize that they're not alone if they feel that too.
Thank you. Anybody else? Josh, thank you. You're muted, Josh.
I would just add on to most of what Deborah said, just about the worthfulness and the value. It's my 6th year teaching, and so I know like those first 3, 4, even 5th year, you're still like gaining that confidence. I would argue that I probably found it, you know, or most of it sometime in there, and now I have to kind of reevaluate, redo everything, re-guess about all of my practices and whether they're good or not, whether they're like meeting the needs, whether they're taking into account what the students like really ultimately like need. Like, you know, I've really had to like look at my curriculum and say like, where can I trim things out and how can I like manipulate stuff so that they are still getting help? You know, it doesn't make any sense, especially in this right here scenario, to kind of like ignore the situation that we're in and just kind of plug away, at least not from my perspective. And so I've been trying to figure out ways to have students like address the issue that they're in, the situation they're in. But yeah, just the value thing about us as teachers and you know, I told you about the coworker that kind of said that our brains aren't always honest with us. And you know, he was talking about his struggles with some of that stuff. And I said, why'd you become a teacher? It feels like the most impractical job. It's impossible to be perfect at it, right? It is. You could always do something better. You could always find some way. There's always some other teacher on campus that's doing something better. And you know, on the flip side of that, you are also providing something that other teachers aren't as well. And I've tried to lean on that while also kind of filling in my shortcomings as a teacher, but understanding what I might provide as opposed to somebody else. You know, Jen Johnson, I think, talks about we are in this together, but that doesn't mean we are like comparing each other and like creating this little hierarchy of who's the best and who's not the best. And so really just figuring out what you provide and like Amy said, like, why did we even become teachers? Really kind of just quickly readdressing that. Like, why is it to probably like make the community better, to, you know, help out young people, you know, to provide something that is not tangible to the world. And so all of those things are valuable. It's just really hard to like keep a bird's eye view on it when you're in the thick of it. So, you know, a lot of what I do is just talk to other teachers as much as I can. And I really make it a point to start off a conversation with teachers most of the time, a lot of the time, like on a personal note, you know, instead of like, hey, how's so-and-so student, instead of starting off on that negative tangent, but starting off on like a, hey, you, a human, let's not talk about work for a second. And gradually, obviously, work comes in, but definitely getting to connect with other teachers and understanding their struggles, from more experienced teachers to less experienced, to different subjects, to different approaches. It is overwhelming at times, but it's extremely kind of helpful to get a better kind of overall picture.
Thank you, Josh. Katie, we have 3 more minutes. So Katie, please, yes.
Just super quick, I just want to point out too that, Josh, I mean, this is a crazy situation we're in, and I've been teaching for 20 years and I feel the same. You know, it's hard and you have to rethink or you feel like you have to rethink everything all the time and what's working and what's not working. And yeah, it's just tough. So having the support of your colleagues around you and just helping each other is so critical right now. It's just so important to have those connections with your coworkers.
Thanks, Katie. Eugene.
I know we're almost out of time, but I wanted to just offer that presence, that which is aware, that which is present within us is inherently compassionate. So if you can be present with your own emotions, no matter what they are, that'll allow you to be present for others, right? So just remember that which is present within you is inherently compassionate. So learning how to just rest in presence, as in mindfulness, as an awareness practice, will help you not only be kind to yourself, but to others. So I just wanted to say that.
That is a perfect ending.
Wow.
Thank you. Panelists, thank you so very much. Participants, thank you.